Hi, everyone. It's the top of the hour. I'm Victor Lund. Thank you all for coming today. I'm really excited to share some great news about what's going on in our lives here. I know, many of you know Alexandra. You've sort of watched her life evolve as a dancer, and she's going to be on today's webinar, and she's going to introduce a gentleman that she's working with today, named Scott Harrison, who I've gotten to know and I find to be just a fantastic human. So, just a little bit of background on this. As you guys know, like Alex turned pro as a dancer when she was like 10. We were posting all over social media, but also, as an only child, she had to come to all of our events. So she's been to like every real estate conference ever known to man, and she's met so many people, and she hasn't been around lately, and people are like, what is she doing? So maybe to kick us off today, I want to just invite Alex up and ask her to tell us about her story and what she's been doing since leaving high school, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of you I've gotten to meet over the years and, build these great relationships with. It's funny, like thinking about being 10 years old, walking the Inman floor, but that's how it goes when your parents work in real estate. So I've been doing that my whole life, post high school for just catching up wise. I went to Syracuse University, double majored in entrepreneurship and advertising. While I was there, I also danced on the Syracuse University dance team. I performed at every football game, every basketball game, just had the best time doing that. And among post grad, I am grateful and excited to be offered a job at Charity Water. So I am really excited to introduce you to my now boss and founder, CEO of Charity Water, Scott Harrison. Here he is.
Let's go, Scott.
Well, great. Super excited to have Alex on our team and to be able to share the story today. I just got some FaceTime with Alex. We're a remote organization right now. We're in 31 states, and over the last week, we just brought everybody in for our one of our 2 annual corporate summits, and then we had hundreds of donors in and a bunch of events over the week, and it was fun to all work together. So I'll start at the beginning. Let me share my screen. So I'll try to make this very interesting. I have a lot of photos.
Maybe you could just, so I read Scott's book.
Yeah.
And if you guys haven't read it, maybe somebody could throw a link in the chat. It was so inspiring to me. When your daughter goes off to college, I mean, everybody kind of knew that Alexandra was going to do something in social media, or at least expected her to do something in social media, or she was going to be a professional dancer. Like those are the two things that were going to kind of for sure shape her life. And now here she is, and she did a lot of that stuff, and before she got to Charity Water, working for Paramount and some other companies. And where she is now and the opportunity that you gave her just like piqued my interest, because we have this incredibly dynamic human being who has been such a great communicator, not only for her own career but for companies, at a very young age. And she lands a job that allows her to do the thing that she absolutely loves to do, but also this job does good for others. And one of the cool things, as we've gotten to know you, Scott, is that like that was your inspo too. Like you had a gig, you were doing great, and then you went, I need to have a job that gives me a higher purpose, and you launched this thing. And
I'm going to tell my story.
Yeah, it's amazing. So
well,
let's jump in.
to say for those who know and love Alex well, I think the stat was over the last 6 months, we hired 16 people. There were 16,500 full applicants for those 16 jobs. So it's always been about 10x harder to get into Charity Water than Harvard or Yale or MIT. So 16 out of 16,500. Okay, well, let me thanks for that. Let me jump in. I was born in Philly. That's mom and dad, middle class family. He was a business guy, electrical engineer. She was a writer. When I was 4, we moved into this very ugly gray house in South Jersey in the dead of winter. And what we didn't know was that this house we had just purchased came with a carbon monoxide gas leak in the basement. So we move in, we all start getting these strange symptoms, migraines, hypertension. And on New Year's Day, 1980, my mom walks across her bedroom and she collapses unconscious. So she is the kind of canary in the coal mine. This leads to hospital visits, the discovery of carbon monoxide, massive amounts in her bloodstream, and then the discovery of the actual culprit, which was this heat exchanger in the basement. So my dad rips it out, throws it on the curb. Dad and I bounced back in our health. We were only sleeping in the house. Mom was 24/7 unpacking boxes and working on the basement. And basically mom never does. So I watch her as a young boy go from this vibrant, healthy woman to an invalid for the rest of her life. And what happened was her immune system irreparably shut down and she had to wear a mask for the next 40 some years of her life. She was allergic to the world, anything chemical, anything with perfume or scent would make her sick. So she lived in special isolation rooms. She wore charcoal masks. I'm unfortunately familiar with every mask that 3M has made, over half a century. And for her to survive was isolation. So she was connected to oxygen and lived in rooms covered in tinfoil. So family planning stopped. I was an only child. I moved into a caregiver role. I'm in a very kind of conservative Christian family. Dad, believes that, God will somehow make sense of this terrible tragedy. They bring me up in the church. I play piano every Sunday at Sunday school and in the church. And I want to be a doctor when I grow up so that I can cure my mother and sick people like my mom. I was recently home and I also found this photo, which I will bless you with. My parents apparently used an actual cereal bowl to cut my hair for many years. So they didn't want to take me to a barber or get a haircut. So they put a bowl on my head and my mom cut around it. So I was kind of a nerd growing up, wanted to be a doctor. Instead of becoming a doctor at 18 years old, I discovered I was only 2 hours away from New York City. And if you really wanted to get in trouble there and rebel against your conservative Christian background, this is a great place to do it. So I, to the horror of my parents, decided to become a nightclub promoter. And for the next 10 years, said, I am going to rebel in style. I'm going to be the #1 nightclub promoter in Manhattan. And I got pretty close after probably 8 of us that were running all of New York City's nightlife. And worked at 40 different nightclubs. And I think this photo sums up the condition of my soul 10 years later, because I am flashing a Rolex watch to some club photographer I have never met so that he knows I own an expensive watch and I have made it. So for 10 years, I was chasing girls, I was chasing cars, I was chasing watches and vacations and being on the right person's private plane, going to the right place. And it led me to a pretty dark place. So this would have been around 10 o'clock at night. This would have been around 3 in the morning. This would be at noon the next day after 12 hours of party and taking Ambien to come down to, start over at 7 p.m. and do it all over again. So I really made a kind of beautiful mess of my life. My life looked really glamorous on the outside. I'm dining at the best restaurants. My girlfriends are on the cover of fashion magazines and walking down catwalks in Milan. And inside, I'm just this kind of rotting, self-loathing person who's picked up every vice that comes with this territory and just this endless pursuit of more. So 28, I have a big life change. I sell everything I own, say I hate my life. I want to try a different life. And I want to go live in the poorest country in the world for 1 year and volunteer on a humanitarian mission and see if I can be useful. So no one would take me at first. And then finally, this one organization said, we are going to Liberia. And I said, where is Liberia? And they said, oh, it's a country in Africa. And I said, I thought Africa was a country. They said, no, actually, Africa has 50 some countries. Africa's a continent. And I wound up saying yes to this organization to pay them $500 a month and join a medical operation backed by 14,000 United Nations peacekeeper troops after a very brutal 14-year civil war had ended. And I was joining a mission that operated a huge 522-foot hospital ship. And it was a very simple idea to this charity. Let's take a hospital ship, find the best doctors and surgeons from all over the world, invite them to live on our ship for a period of months or a year, and then let's sail this thing up and down the coast of Africa and help as many people as possible. So I was not a doctor, but I joined them as a storyteller, as a photojournalist, where hopefully the photos that I took and the stories that I was able to tell would help them raise awareness for this important work. I go all in. I quit drinking and I quit smoking and I quit drugs and I quit gambling and pornography and say, like, I'm going to put all these vices to the side and see where this might take my life. And I also met an extraordinary person the minute I joined this mission for Mercy Ships. This is Dr. Gary Parker, who was a California plastic surgeon. And just like me, he had heard there was a ship where he could be useful, and he volunteered for 3 months. And when I joined, he had been there 21 years. So he fell in love with his work, and he never went back to his plastic surgery practice, and had sailed with this ship for 2 decades, offering free surgery to people who needed it most. So I wanted to know everything I could about this guy and what he was like and why he cared, and what a life of service could look like. So I land in Liberia. The whole country shot up from a 14-year war led by Charles Taylor and child soldiers. There's bullet holes through everything. People are living in bombed out apartment buildings, bombed out houses, that were once beautiful, but had just been devastated by the war. And there's one doctor for every 50,000 people living in this country. Now, just for comparison, in America, I think we have a doctor for every 280 of us. So if you got sick, you were out of luck. And that's why we were there. That's why the doctors had come. And we would post these flyers saying, if you have a giant facial tumor, we specialize in that. If you have flesh-eating disease or a cleft lip or a cleft palate, if rebel soldiers burned you and you need facial reconstruction, turn up. And my 3rd day on this mission in Africa, I took this picture of the 5,000 sick people who responded to those flyers. And they were standing in the parking lot outside of a stadium, a soccer stadium that the government had given us to screen patients. The problem was we only had 1,500 available surgery slots to offer. So we sent 3,500 sick people home that day because we didn't have enough doctors. The first child in line that I had to photograph for the medical library, his name was Alfred. He was 14. His mom was smart. She'd gotten him there a couple days early, so he would be seen. And she pulls out this photo and said, here was my son at 10. And here is my son now, because he didn't have a chance to go see a doctor or a surgeon. And I realized that's why these physicians had come from all over the world so that they could help kids like Alfred. And a couple of days later, I scrubbed up and I documented Dr. Gary in this amazing 8.5-hour surgery. They remove Alfred's tumor, and I get to take him back to his village with his new face. And it was just extraordinary, kind of witnessing and documenting up close these medical miracles, where I would wake up on a Monday morning and I would go down and I would photograph Marthaline for the medical library. And then on Tuesday, I would see this woman's life transformed through surgery because these people had come. So I loved it. I took 50,000 photos that first year, and I'm blasting my whole list of everybody that I knew in the clubs. Some of them liked getting this. Some of them did not like getting this. So there were definitely some unsubscribes. But really just was so moved by the work of the doctors transforming these people's lives. So the year ended, I went back for a 2nd year, and that's when I learned what was making people sick, and it was dirty water. Something I had never contemplated before in 29 years of life. I didn't know humans drank dirty water. And as I went into the rural areas, I saw the sources of water. And I saw swamps and ponds and rivers, I saw 13-year-old girls drinking from ponds in the middle of their village, and just kind of realized, oh my gosh, like this is the only water this little girl has ever touched or tasted in her human life in 13 years. And it was filled with bacteria and bugs. And just remember kind of having that eureka moment saying, my God, half the country is sick because they don't have water. No wonder 5,000 people are standing in a parking lot with things growing on their face, blind with trachoma. Why is no one working on the root cause of all of this sickness? So I remember sharing these photos with Dr. Gary, and he kind of simply encouraged me at the end of my second year to go work on water. He said, great, why don't you be the guy that brings clean water to everybody on the world? And why don't you try and do that before you die? So I was 29 and full of idealism. And I said, all right, Dr. Gary, I'm going to try. So I came back to New York City and I said, I'm going to try to bring clean water to every single human being alive on planet Earth. Feels like a good use of a life and a noble mission. And I didn't know how long it would take. I thought this would be easy. Maybe we could knock this out in 3 to 5 years, or maybe 7 years. So I've been working at that now for 18 years, and I'll share at the end some of the progress we've made. But as we sit here today on this call or wherever you are watching this, there are 703 million people in election season 2024 who are drinking disgusting, toxic, dirty water around the world. So it's about 1/10 of the humans alive on planet Earth are drinking poisonous water. And 80% of these live in rural areas. 20% of the population lives in cities and towns. And if you were to come with me, you would see things that shock you. You would see children, you would still see teenagers drinking brown, viscous swamp water. You would see kids drinking what looks more like chocolate milk or coffee, but instead is filled with bacteria and disease and mud. And, I have now been to 72 countries. I've been to Africa more than 50 times since starting this work. It never gets easier to watch a child poison themselves in real time in front of you, because that's the only water that they have. When we come from a background where water looks very different. This is sparkling water that came out of a bottle. Kids and cows often share the same sources of bad water. There's a little girl I met in Kenya. Every time she would drink from it was the Molo River, she would vomit, and she would drink a little more and she would throw up, and she would drink and she would throw up. And it was this horrible cycle that we watched a few times. And I remember taking this bottle from her and giving her the clean water I had in the car. But then actually, I held on to the bottle, and it made its way back to New York City, and I gave it to a lab at Rockefeller University, and they put it under a microscope, and they said, no wonder she's throwing up, because this is what's in her water. It's alive. And when you drink water that's alive, it makes you sick. And it's just a huge human problem correlated to so much of the sickness and disease burden around the world. I also learned there was a connection to education. I'm sure there's people on this call who are passionate about education. And I learned that 1 in 3 schools in the world didn't have water or toilets for their students. And this is one of the top reasons why teenage girls drop out of school. They have to carry 40 pounds of dirty water on their backs. And it's backbreaking work. They drop out of school as the burden falls on them to go get the water. And also the school doesn't have water or toilets. So girls that don't have to walk will stay home 4 or 5 days when they get their period, because they're ashamed to go to a school with no water and no toilets. So huge impediment to education. And then finally, learned it was always the women, and it was always the girls, and it was always the mothers. It was never the men. It was always, exclusively women's issue. And women were digging in sand. They were, ankle deep in cow feces and cow urine, trying to get to the eye of springs that they share with donkeys, with horses. And, women are braving crocodile attacks in rivers to bring this home to their family. So it's a huge problem. I bet there's nobody on this call that ever has experienced this. It's very rare that I meet someone who's had to drink toxic water or, has been at risk of rape on an 8-hour walk to a faraway pond or swamp, or has lost a child to trachoma or typhoid. But if you were unlucky enough to be born in the 10% of the world, this would be your only lived experience. You would never know what clean water would look like or taste. So that's really the simple mission. Now, the great news is it's a completely solvable problem. So we have the cure for clean water. We just haven't implemented it. So there's not a human being alive on earth that we cannot definitively bring a sustainable source of clean water to. There's no answer we're looking for in a lab. We're not trying to cure a disease. And a lot of different things work in a lot of different environments. So you can drill wells, you can build biosand filters and gravity-fed systems, and you can harvest the rain. I'll show you just 3 of now the kind of 11 technologies that we use. If you drill a well, what the community doesn't have access to is $1 million of equipment. They don't have access to skilled hydrogeologists who know how to come and tap into these aquifers. But when you bring in that equipment, it seems almost too easy. A rig comes in the center of a village, starts drilling, and clean water shoots up into the air from an aquifer. It was trapped 150 feet beneath that village. And it's one of the most amazing kind of experiences to be a part of when clean water is released in a village. Biosand filters, we run the largest program in the world now in Southeast Asia. There's a lot of surface water. It just looks like this. So we work with the women to build what's kind of like a giant Brita in their home. Dirty water goes in the top, clean water comes out that's safe enough for all of us to drink. And, for $65 or $70, you kind of have a filter miracle in the village. In Rajasthan, India, it's very dry. It's very hot. It's 125 degrees in the Thar Desert. So you actually can't drill because the water table is too low. But it rains really, really hard 1 month a year. So what we do there is we capture the monsoon rains and we build rainwater harvesting tanks. So a woman or a family can collect 1 year's worth of rain in 1 month. Very, very powerful, simple solution, and kind of live off the grid with that clean water. So whatever the solution is, the minute you take a human from dirty water to clean water, it transforms their life. It changes everything about their life. It dramatically impacts health. In some of these villages, we'll find an 80% reduction in disease just in the subsequent 12 months after a water point is built. It impacts education. When a community has clean water or a school has clean water, the girls go back in school. Students get better grades. There's lots of data to back this up. It impacts women, and mothers get more time to spend with their families. Women start small businesses using the time that they are not spending walking for water, baking donuts, like this woman, Postina, in northern Uganda. And she told us she uses this money to spend on school uniforms so that her kids can actually go to school. This woman, Helen, told us when she got clean water, she felt beautiful for the first time in her life because she finally had enough water to wash her face and to wash her body and to wash her clothes. And water had the power just to restore dignity and make this mother, this really heroic woman, feel like she was beautiful because she was clean. Water makes people healthier. It also makes them wealthier. A lot of data that's come in on the economic returns that when you focus on water, you drive so many other things. That time back turns into productive work. You improve health, you improve education. And this is now trackable and provable of how it also changes people's income levels when they get clean water. Last thing I'd say is, everybody thinks this is a good idea. So we're less than 2 weeks away from a contentious election, and half the country's pissed at the other half. And, this might be one of the few things in the world everyone can agree on. Both Republicans and Democrats can agree that humans need clean water to thrive, to live a good life. And you get to build a really big tent of support, people who might fight to the death on social or political issues, but can come together around a universal common good. So I'll talk a little bit about the organization, some of the things that we've tried to do to innovate and storytell to make a big dent in this issue. So again, the mission for 18 years has been simple. Let's get everyone on Earth life's most basic need. But when I started, I was 30, and I realized so many people didn't trust charities. 42% of Americans said they didn't trust charities. 70% of Americans don't trust charities as well. And I thought, what if there was another way to do charity? What if there was a way to speak to the cynic and the skeptic and create a new model that would build trust? Nick Kristof had written in the New York Times that charity brands also sucked. You know, that Colgate or Crest was better at marketing than these world-saving causes that really improve people's lives. So I had a couple ideas of how we might be able to do charity differently. So really the vision has been to reinvent or reimagine the charitable experience to build this much bigger consensus and group and community of givers. Three simple ideas. First is, what if we could just give away 100% of every donation we ever took in? And your business people watching, you're like, okay, so how would the overhead get paid? How would the staff's salaries? And what about the office and the flights? And I said, well, I'm going to open up 2 separate bank accounts, and I'm going to look for a small group of visionary private donors and business leaders and entrepreneurs to pay the unsexy running costs, the Epson toner, the office rent, the phone bills, the staff salaries, so that 100% of millions and tens of millions of donations could go directly to fund water projects. So we were kind of one of the first charities in the world to ever separate out the overhead from the public funding. And then the second thing, I said, well, listen, if money's non-fungible, why don't we build technology to track those donations? Why don't we prove to people what we did with their money? So we became the first charity in the world just to geolocate every completed project on Google Earth and on Google Maps, so people could see exactly where their money was going. They could see the satellite images of these pictures of these wells as they were built. And then the third kind of pillar was this belief that for the work to be culturally appropriate, for it to be sustainable, it had to be led by the locals in each of these countries. So our job was to find and then build the capacity of Ethiopian organizations, organizations in Bangladesh or Malawi or Cambodia. And we would create thousands of local jobs as we scaled, and they would lead their communities and their countries forward into the future. So put these 3 simple ideas together. Best idea I had for day 1 was to throw a party in a nightclub. I'm sad to say. So I got 700 people to turn up to my 31st birthday party. I put this big plexi box at the door, and I said, if you want to come in, you have to donate $20. And at the end of the night, there was $15,000 in that box. We took 100% of that money to northern Uganda, where we built our first well, and we fixed a couple adjacent wells. And we sent the photos and the GPS coordinates back to the people who attended. And we said, you came to a party and people are drinking clean water because you gave $20. Now let's keep doing that. And that simple idea of closing the loop was so powerful that we knew we were really on to something. We came up with ad campaigns where we just removed water from everyday objects. How would your pasta taste without water? What if you had to give your child death in a baby bottle? Like so many moms around the world, and the responsibility of so much of the death of children. I thought if we had compelling, arresting images, we'd get donated media. And that's turned out to be true in the backs of buses or taxi tops or indoor billboards or outdoor billboards, takeovers of Times Square. We worked with luxury retail. Saks Fifth Avenue gave me their windows for a month to put up photos and to build wells inside luxury retail stores. We work with brands like American Express, who put us on their homepage for 4 months, and they took out $1 million print campaign in magazines. Have gotten to work with the Apples and eBays and Amazons and Ubers of the world as we've scaled, all trying to engage their employees and engage their customers, in this issue. Tried to, always innovate in fundraising. We came up with this kind of very simple idea where we asked people to donate their birthdays. And we said, look, you're having a birthday. You don't need a tie or a wallet. You don't need a handbag. You don't need a birthday party, probably. What if you turned your birthday into a giving moment? And the 7-year-old kid took this idea in Austin, Texas, and he started knocking on doors, asking for $7 donations. And a month later, Max Schmidhauser had raised $22,000 through his 7th birthday. We had people like Tony Hawk gave up his birthday, founders of Spotify, 6-year-old kids in New York City. So this movement really kind of sprang up of 6-year-olds and 16-year-olds and 89-year-olds, who were donating their birthday so more people could actually have birthdays. So that birthday movement raised well over $50 million as people would say, I don't need anything. I want to help with my birthday. We had some people say, I love the birthday idea, but my birthday's not 11 months from now. Can I climb a mountain and raise $1 a foot up to the summit? Or can I jump out of a plane because I'm afraid of heights and my friends would donate money? Can I sail across the Atlantic Ocean? Or Sid and Sarah took the $10,000 that they'd saved for a ring and they built a well in India instead. They wanted to start their marriage out with an act of radical generosity that was more important than what they would wear on a finger for hundreds of people to get clean water. Riley Goodfellow decided she was going to eat only rice and beans for a month and raise $15,000. And it's kind of beautiful. In her hands, she has just a bunch of pages with lines on it. And her mom sent us this photo and said, Riley learned on your website that 4,500 kids die every day of bad water. And she asked me for paper and pen, and she wrote 4,500 lines because she wanted to feel how big the problem was. So really inspired by so many kids. One of my favorites, Maddie, she did a bunch of lemonade stands, 12 lemonade stands in Vancouver, Canada. She would not come in even in the rain. She would sell lemonade in downpours because she was so passionate about this. Or Jesse, who listened to Nickelback for 168 consecutive hours with headphones on. And people felt so bad for him that they gave him $36,000 of donations in solidarity for his week of Nickelback. So, this really became the story of our community, of all these amazing people who would take this simple idea of clean water for humans, put their stamp on it, their birthday on it, their activity, and go out and really do some amazing things. We, tried to do fun campaigns. This is a campaign where we laid out all of the materials that went into a $10,000 project. So if a donor wrote a $10,000 check for a well, we'd say, this is where your money's going. You're buying PVC, you're buying pipe. But if you gave 10 grand for the project in Cambodia, your money would go to buy a completely different set of sand and gravel and rock and materials, molds, for a very different intervention. Our team was just recently in Bangladesh, again, trying to bring this alive. This was the source of a whole community of people. And they took a microscope with them and they just put this water under a microscope. And this is what people were drinking. Hard to imagine giving a baby or a young child or even us drinking water, these parasites and amoebas and worms crawling around in our body, attacking our intestines because of the water that we've had to drink. But that's the reality for 700 million people around the world. Trying to innovate in the water space, maybe people are sitting there saying, that's great, you build a well, what happens when it breaks? Well, wells do break. And often the system is not there to maintain them. And it's a really sad kind of environment to be in when you realize that there was a life-giving center of the village and something went wrong. So about 10 years ago, we tried to also start working on the problem of the 2 billion people who live in fear of their water system going out on any given day. And we were inspired by Nest, and we wondered, if you could have a smart home, why couldn't you have a smart well? And we had no R&D budget, but we got some money out of Google for R&D, and we tried to make a sensor that we could connect our wells to, tried to make it for $200. Made a lot of bad sensors that were solar powered that didn't actually work, sensors that were supposed to have long battery life that also didn't work. So we failed for the first 5 years, and then we eventually discovered a pilot that worked. And we installed 3,000 in Ethiopia. And what's so cool about this is just a very dumb well, typical well. And in about 10 minutes, it's being retrofitted with a remote sensor and cloud connected. It's a very simple idea. Now in this remote part of Ethiopia, a little girl can pump a well, the whole community can come there and we can see how much water is flowing. We've kind of pulled back into the R&D phase of this, but the vision is that here's a well that's going great until it's not, it breaks. A woman in Zimbabwe gets that notification. She sends out a technician. So kind of like Geek Squad or Apple Care for wells. He turns up in the village, pulls the guts out of the well, finds that repair, gets clean water flowing again. And we could see that was about 3.5 days of downtime. And the well is back to being productive again. So that's really the vision of keeping water flowing over time. We're 18 years into this journey now. We've raised a little over $1 billion thanks to the generosity of millions of everyday people who have joined this mission, have grown the organization to about 100 million a year in donations. And the sad thing is that's the largest water charity in America. So this is a deeply overlooked and underfunded sector still. A lot of people are surprised, like it's water. How come Gates isn't doing this? How come? Well, they're not. People have not been working on this issue, we believe, primarily because it does not affect them. Cancer has affected 100% of us all. And there's a lot of money that goes into cancer research and a lot of money that goes into homelessness and goes into alma maters, who helped us get our education and where we are today. But so little money goes into water. So we've now been able to impact the lives of people living across 171,000 communities around the world, helped just shy of 20 million people get clean water, which is a good start, and it's a lot of impact. And I've had the chance, as we've aged, to really look back and kind of reflect a little bit on the journey. Obviously, this guy's long gone, so I've got a beautiful family. It's my wife, Victoria. I've got a 10-year-old boy now, Jackson, 8-year-old daughter. Just had a 1-year-old, a little surprise third turned 1 a couple of weeks ago. And, I get to do this for a living. We get to travel around the world and invite people into a story of generosity that helps others. Still inspired by this guy. He has now been there 40 years, just celebrated 40 years of impact. And, he'll tell you he's lost his hair, but he just continues to use his hands in the service of others, operating on people who can't afford it. Alfred's still doing well. It's funny, I talk to him a lot. He's got a bunch of kids now, so he's a plumber and is supporting a family and is doing really well in West Africa. And I got to see our very first well on the 10th anniversary as well, which was cool. And it was still pumping water in that refugee camp in northern Uganda. And our local partners believe that over 10 million liters of clean water had flowed through, benefiting thousands and thousands of people because a bunch of people came and gave $20. And the organization just found a great partner to implement that project. If you're interested in more, I wrote a book called Thirst. It became a New York Times bestseller. All the money goes straight to charity water. I can never make a penny off the advance or any of the sales, but there's a lot more in the building and a lot more stories in there. And people like Bill Gates and Mike Bloomberg and Rich Branson have said nice things about the book. Kind of wrapping up here, as we look ahead, 19 million feels like a start. It's 1,000 stadiums full of people, but you put it against the problem that we have set out to solve, and it's actually only 1/37th of the way there. So we're about 2.6% of the way to goal. And there is so much more to do, and we simply must go faster and grow the movement and get more people involved to really make an impact. I think more people are starting to realize that water is health. Water means empowering women. It empowers education. It fuels economic growth. If you care about climate, these are the most vulnerable communities in the world to the droughts and the floods. They produce the least amount of carbon. Giving them a sustainable source of clean water makes them resilient in the future. There's all these global goals, but by just tackling one, water, you get to move the needle on 8 others by focusing on the root cause. So how you can help, no big ask here, but Victor and Alex said, tell people how they can get involved. Obviously, we still do the birthday thing. It's pretty simple. You just donate your birthday and you ask your friends and your coworkers to donate your age in dollars. So 16-year-olds ask for $16 and 58-year-olds ask for $58. And some people add a 0 to that and give more. Some people can give less. But it's a simple way to spread awareness and to help. The second is a monthly giving community we have. We call it the Spring. And this is just like Spotify or Netflix or your magazine or news subscription for clean water. It costs us $40 to get one person access to clean water. And there's probably a lot of people who could, put that on autopilot, never think about it again. And every single month, one human gets clean water, where 100% of the $40 goes. And we now have Spring members in 149 countries. We've built really cool tech and dashboards where you can track your money and see the impact that you're actually having. We send out great comms of where those small donations are going. And then the third is maybe there's a couple of people who could take on an entire village. We have small businesses do that, and we have a lot of families do that at the end of the year. And they say, we scaled back on Christmas gifts so people could have access to clean water. It's about $10,000 to give an entire community clean water. And I showed you his picture earlier, but really what that means is that, a kid like John Bosco, his family, his entire community, one day wakes up and drilling rigs are heading towards their rural village because somebody wrote a check or got their birthday campaign up to 10 grand. And local Rwandan drillers jump out, start looking for water, find it. And in less than a week, clean water is flowing from the center of the village. And a little kid like John Bosco tastes it for the first time. Now being an aging organization, we've gotten to go back and visit people years later. And on the 8-year visit, we found our kind of cute teenage kid was all grown up, and he was a man. He had just gotten married, and he had just had his first son, his first daughter. So this is Jean-Marie. And John Bosco, we realized like his daughter, Jean-Marie, was now born into an alternate environment. Like she will never need to go to that swamp because somebody cared about her and these people that were living, a couple thousand miles away, and decided to, really make their dreams come through with clean water. So, we've been able to do that now about 170,000 times. And we want to do that for everyone in the world so that no child is born into a world of dirty water. So if any of those things move you, donating your birthday or joining the Spring or maybe sponsoring a project, we'd love to have you. We really believe this is a solvable problem, and we can solve this in our lifetime with a whole lot of everyday people and a whole lot of help. Super cool to partner with you guys, and thanks for letting me share the story.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and so moving. I'm doing it for the first time. I'm giving up. I'm going to give my birthday to charity, to give it to Charity Water. So I put a link that is in the chat to mine. I see we have like 2,700. My goal is 10,000. I don't know if I aim too high or not, but I have a lot of friends, and hopefully when they understand your mission and what you're able to accomplish, it'll go a long way. I know my partner Marilyn jumped on the call. I'm not sure, Marilyn, if you can come on screen or not, but one of the things that you did was, you really focused our charitable giving on organizations where 100% of your donation goes directly to the cause. So maybe you can talk a little bit about CASA as our local charity, and then, why Charity Water is profoundly going to be our international charity.
Well, I think, Scott, the one slide that, well, first of all, you made me cry about 14 times the first time I watched you and when I read the book. So beyond that, you're amazing, and not in a bad way, but in a great way. But what I love is you have the slide where you talk about how fixing this one fundamental problem fixes so many other problems.
Yeah.
And how it enables, I can go back to it. I love that slide. This one. Yeah. And so when you think about how can my $1, how can it fix not one problem, but several? And of someone, of course, that has a amazing daughter who now works for you. Thank you so much. To see how to enable women to do amazing things. One of I'm the chair of the National Small Business Association right now. And the statistics I just heard in Washington is that the #1 demographic of people starting new businesses globally is African-American women.
Yeah.
Guess what? If you fix this problem, you enable them to get to school, to bring those amazing, topics to life, not only in their country, but in everywhere, right? In America and everywhere else. So I love the fact of let's go to the bottom line. The bottom line is if you're not healthy, you can't do anything, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm so inspired about this. Yes, our cost is great. That affects individual children in our local market and helps them organize, enjoy a holiday that they might never have been able to do. But I think for me, this one has, I think part of your point, and I didn't realize that how underfunded water is relative to some of the other things you mentioned. But the fact that this affects, I think sometimes people are like, well, like you say, well, it doesn't affect me. Well, yes, it does. We live in a global economy our global world is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and innovation and great ideas and world solving problems comes from everywhere these days, right? So just because this person that needs water is in Uganda doesn't mean it's not going to help someone in New York City with something soon, right? So I'm just so, of course, thrilled that my daughter found her passion in doing this. But more importantly, I think that, what I would love to find out is, are there ways we can encourage the organizations within real estate? So there's real estate associations, there's real estate multiple listing service technology companies, there's brokerages, right? That where they can sponsor a village and have sort of a sister village, if you will, where they can really feel connected to this path. And there are many companies in real estate that are great at supporting women's issues. If you look at the exposure of who's in real estate, it is definitely more women than men. Many of them were undersatisfied, undersupported, single moms who struggled with their own issues and would totally appreciate, I think, the same kinds of struggles that are happening with women around the world. So I want to keep this going. This is just the beginning. Thank you, Victor, for being our family member that kicked this off. My birthday was in July, or I would have done it. Alex told us about it after it was my birthday, but I'll do it next year. But I think there's lots of things we can do to help. There's amazing people that love their communities, love women, love families in our industry. And I think we can really get there. I mean, there's almost 2 million.
Conferences are one way, getting opportunities to speak in front of, a group of people who could then take that. But it's really, it's awareness and ambassadors and advocates. People say, hey, I did this thing. Have you heard of this organization? Have you heard of this issue? We have a very limited marketing budget, so we really need to kind of grow through our community.
Well, one of the things that's great, and you may not know this, and she's going to be embarrassed I say it, but Alex has been a dancer since she's been little. People know more about her than they do about us, and frankly, care more about her than they do about Victor and I. And so every time I get anywhere, I get to tell the Charity Water story at least 25 times because they ask me, what's Alex doing? And so we share it on a very regular basis and use her as our excuse to get into it. But whatever it takes to get people talking, we're happy to do that.
Love it.
Well, Scott, thank you. I know we borrowed a lot of your time here today, and I just really appreciate what you're doing, your mission, inviting Alexandra to join you on that mission, giving her the opportunity to be creative and to really work at an organization that not only is doing good, but is doing good with great imagination. I mean, I think what you've done with all of the innovation that you've done at Charity Water is inspiring to all of us who could always use innovation in our own businesses. But really appreciate the opportunity to join in and lend a hand and do some good. And hopefully we'll hit that 10,000 number. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. I'm really grateful. And we'll be publishing this webinar. We'll record it and send it to everybody. And hopefully we'll be able to hit that goal. So thanks so much.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me share.
Have a great weekend, everybody.